Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Josh.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are the Hiking Fools, bringing you unique personal insight on Glacier National Park that you can't get anywhere else. In this episode, we are discussing the Iceberg Lake hike, and we'll cover some of the need to know before you go, stats and figures, our personal experience, and things that we feel like you should know before you break out on this hike. Now, Iceberg Lake is in the Many Glacier area, which is one of our favorites, certainly, just because of the jagged peaks and the alpine lakes, and it's just overwhelming. And what do they call it even, Sarah?
Well, they call it the little Switzerland of North America. All the lodges actually built in the park kind of resemble, some chalets in the Swiss Alps. So the peaks are they rise quickly from the ground level there, and they're pretty spectacular. So it's a great place to go and visit. Very, very popular, so expect some crowds. But the Iceberg Lake Trail is awesome. It leaves from the Swift Current Motor Inn, and it kind of rises pretty quick, and the trail is labeled moderate, but it somewhat levels out in a way and then gradually kind of rises up towards the lake. So it's doable for a family hike. You can take your time and stop at some falls along the way and just enjoy the view. Lots of wildlife.
Yeah, the mountains are kind of different over here in Many Glacier. There's so much relief or topography, like the distance or the elevation from where you're standing to the top of some of these mountains is just, and they're right on top of you. So like Sarah said, it's reminiscent of the Swiss Alps, and it's kind of a neat, unique part of the park, as each one is. This is in the northeast part of the park, and it's pretty far trip, no matter where you're coming from. It's always on the other side. It's kind of the longest, whether you go around one way or the other. It's a couple of 2.5 hours probably from Kalispell. And so you got to plan that in. You're planning your hike, and you're looking at mileage, and you're looking at the effort that it will take, and then add 5 hours of driving time, which at my age, before I get a little stiff, and then after I get a little stiff. And so it's hard to handle sometimes, but you got to get out and walk around a little bit. So Many Glacier is sometimes more difficult to get to, but definitely worth the trip.
The elevation of Iceberg Lake is over 6,000 feet. What else do we have, Statman? What's the elevation gain? What's our miles?
Yeah, it's 4.5 miles one way, so 9-mile round trip, and about 1,200 feet of elevation gain through the course of that. So as far as glacier hikes go, the almost 4-to-1 ratio of miles to elevation is relatively moderate, and I think that's probably what it's labeled. The lake, as Sarah mentioned, sits at about 6,000 feet, so weather is a factor. We've got plenty of stories about crazy weather because of the mountains where they're positioned. All of a sudden, weather comes from the west, and you don't know what's coming. I mean, we've been rained on, certainly. We've been, you could say, a downpour. You could say we've been drenched, and I will never forget the hiding hunched under a small fir tree, like a fir bush almost, and getting pelted in the legs with hail.
So this is before we had some of our fancy hiking equipment. This was early on, and we only had a poncho. So right. We both shoved ourselves in one poncho, and our calves were showing, calves and feet, and the hail was just bruising our calves because it was just... But you can't see the weather that's coming up over the garden wall. So you just have to be prepared for anything, like we like to discuss. Bring your rain gear, bring a puffy, be ready for anything, because you just never know up in that high elevation area.
Yeah, for sure. You're surprised all the time at what suddenly comes. It looks like a blue sky day, and suddenly it's stormy. So we've said that plenty of times, and most of you might know that. But in the mountains, be ready for anything and be prepared for anything. One little green poncho. I think you got lucky. Your face was out the hood part, and I just had to hope and pray that everything was going to be all right. So, but we made it. And as I mentioned, the lake sits at about 6,000 feet. So that contributes to that, the very weather. But, I remember too, Sarah, we went to Yellowstone once and camped at Yellowstone Lake, and that's sits at about 7,700 feet of elevation. And remember how cold that was? I mean, if you're camping in these places or hiking, like if you're up that high, it's chilly. And I just kind of compared the two. Iceberg Lake is high, but if you've had experience in other national parks, it's similar, but not exactly the same.
But it also can be really hot too. We've definitely hiked it to this lake, and it's rather warm out. About 2.3 miles in, you get to Ptarmigan Creek and Ptarmigan Falls, and it's kind of a fun place to take a rest and splash around in the water, filter a little bit, have a snack, cool off before you move on. This area is great for moose. I think, almost see moose every time we hike. Yeah. Bull moose, cows. So be moose aware. We say be bear aware. Do that as well. The moose are a little bit more unpredictable. So just keep your distance from all the wildlife and have your bear spray ready. But there is a trail junction on this trail as well. So the trailhead will lead to two different places. Go to Ptarmigan Tunnel, and it'll head you off to Iceberg Lake. So when you get to your junction, it's just past Ptarmigan Falls. Ptarmigan Tunnel kind of goes to the right, and you want to stay to the left or go straight on to Iceberg Lake.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is it could be cold, it might be warm, it might be sunny, and it might be rainy. So you're welcome for that, so you know exactly what to expect. But yeah, the moose, I remember they're tall. I mean, think about a horse and then add some, and that's a moose, and they were right on the trail. We've seen bull moose, as mentioned, just really cool to see. And keep your distance, wildlife, respect that. Their area, but the one was a female, a cow moose, and she was right on the trail and wouldn't move. And that's kind of characteristic of Glacier. Actually, we were hiking recently, and a mountain goat, we had to step aside because he thought, the trail is probably a better path for him. So, we're the ones out of our element. So anyway, the moose was unbelievably tall, close up, and unbelievably shifty. And again, we made it. A group of people were around us, and everybody was kind of speechless, wondering what to do. And we just got out of the way because moose is a dangerous animal as well. But Sarah, you had a great tip. How do you encounter a moose? What's the best thing to do? You have a kind of a fun tip.
Well, I've never actually tested it, but what I've heard is that if you have a moose that's acting aggressive and is trying to approach you and going to charge you, I would recommend running to the base of a tree. They're not as agile as you think. And so just running around the tree, they really just want to get you out of the way. So I think they're going to lose interest pretty quickly if they do charge you and you run towards the base of the tree and get on the other side of it. You can also bear spray a moose. We've never had to do that, thankfully. But chances are nothing's going to happen. Give it plenty of space. The rangers talk about a good distance between you and the wildlife. And I remember coming out of Iceberg Lake and a big bull moose. What amazes me is that we weren't too far from the lake, and we got to a place where there was people standing. So we figured there was some sort of animal there, and not too far off into the brush. It was pretty thick brush, but there was a huge bull moose, and you could hardly see it. He was probably, 40 feet from us, which is too close. That's too close. And we couldn't even see it. So they hide pretty well in that thick brush. As, they're a huge animal, but they still can hide rather easily. So just be aware of your surroundings, make noise. And, we ushered people to get out of there and give that bull moose plenty of space. But incredible to see. I just love seeing the wildlife on any trail, even down to the smallest golden mantle ground squirrel or Colombian ground squirrel. They're pretty fabulous to see.
Yeah, Sarah, you mentioned it. You could bear spray a moose. You can't just go bear spraying anything, bear spray a squirrel, bear spray a marmot. But you know what? It's
just
your best,
don't bear spray yourself.
It's your best line of defense. We have to say it. Don't spray the bear spray on yourself as a protectant. It is a weapon in defense of an attack of an animal. So we just got to put that out there. Again, we're hoping that this is a resource, and for everybody that listens, that we're kind of helping you out in terms of preparing for the hike. But yeah, we saw that moose, and I said, "Moose, why the long face?"
So when you actually do arrive at the lake, so you'll see that this lake sets in that classic glacial cirque. So the big wall behind the lake there is known as the big cathedral wall. And also it's part of the Ptarmigan Wall as well. And it's got a couple mountains there. So you got Iceberg Peak, which is over 9,000 feet. And you also have Mount Wilbur off to the left, which is another 9,000er.
Monster, yeah.
It's all part of the Lewis Range, and this beautiful aquamarine tarn, it sits right in, like I said, the glacial cirque of these towering peaks. The cliff walls are over 3,000 feet high, and some of these bergs floating in the lake can often be around late July. And we've been there obviously too when there's no bergs, but it's pretty cool to see when the bergs are floating. You know, they kind of break off the glaciers off the back there and float around for a while.
Yeah, spectacular. Now, we've got to take a short break. We have hardly even gotten to much of the hike itself, which we are going to do, but we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor.
Yeah, Josh, we might get lost today.
Well, you always say that.
But one thing that's never lost, my access to my bank account, thanks to Freedom Bank's mobile tools.
Yeah, they're local, they're personal, and they're ready for adventure, just like us.
Freedom Bank, they keep us on the right path.
All right, stick with us. We'll be right back. We've got another segment coming right up.
Whether you're hiking Avalanche Lake or conquering Mount Sa'i, you want to be prepared. Same goes for your money. Freedom Bank delivers peak performance banking with mobile tools, expert advice, and a personal touch. Freedom Bank is proud sponsor of Hiking Fools because adventures are better when your bank is as ready as you are. Freedom Bank, we want to be your bank. Give us a call at 892-1776. Member FDIC.
All right, welcome back. We are the Hiking Fools, and we have been discussing the Iceberg Lake Trail today. And boy, there's so much to say. You heard that in the first segment. We love the hike, and it's so great, and it's so renowned, really. It's Iceberg Lake. They're like icebergs floating in the lake. Although, as Sarah said, we've been there a few times where there aren't any, and everybody just kind of looks at each other, especially those visiting. Like, I thought this was Iceberg Lake, but as we mentioned, conditions change, and each year as the activity, among the glaciers within some of these glacial cirques it's different, and so you've got to be
less beautiful though. It's still awesome.
Absolutely, it's no less cold either. You might think that's pretty obvious, but Iceberg Lake is cold, and we have dipped in the lake a handful of times. I know we did it the first time we went. We did it the last time we went, and I will never forget the hand in water contest. You could use your foot or whatever you want to do, but me and your sister, we put our hands in and just saw who could hold it in there the longest. And we should have timed it, how long we could actually do it, but it's great to just challenge somebody you don't even know and say, hey, let's put our hands in this water and see who can hold it longer. And then the winner gets like the other person's granola bar, something like that. But it's fun to do because it really hurts. Your hand gets all red or your foot. But hey, bragging rights is worth it. But that's not what we're talking about here on the hike. It's just something you can add. But we want to mention how long it takes to hike this trail and any others that we're talking about.
Yeah, we hike about 3 miles an hour, but depending on the hiking shape you're in and what you're used to with elevation, that can kind of vary. But yeah, Josh, tell us about how long, if you're hiking 9 miles, how many hours do you expect to be on the trail?
For sure. What works for us is about 1/2, right? So if you're hiking 10 miles, it might take you about 5 hours. And in this case, that's about what you would get. Iceberg Lake is a 9-mile round trip. Plan for 5 hours. It just seems to work out that way no matter what, no matter how fast we're hiking or how long we stop and look at something, or, how long we take to have lunch, or if we stop and chat with people. It takes about a half of the time of the mileage. And so you can kind of calculate that way. So in this example, getting over to Many Glacier takes about 2.5, 3 hours. So you're talking 5 hours in the car and at least 5 hours hiking. So it's a 10-hour day. Get places early in Glacier, so if you leave at 6 in the morning, you're done at 4 and just in time for dinner. But we also a lot of times add 20%. Add in the old Glacier hour where you say, I'm going to be home at 4 and it's 5:15. I'm going to be home at 6:30 for dinner and it's 9:30. So you just never know.
And if you are coming from Kalispell, there's a couple different ways to go. So you can go in the west entrance and drive over the Going to the Sun Road, which is what we really like. Peak season, it might be a little slower going because of traffic, and you never know what kind of jam up there you're going to encounter. But we really like that route. And then you exit at St. Mary, take a left, and follow your route to Babb, and that's where you re-enter into the park at Many Glacier. You can also take Highway 2, from West Glacier all the way to East Glacier, and then you can go in towards Two Medicine and take, the Looking Glass Highway, which is really beautiful, Highway 89. Go to the Keio Junction, get a pastry at Keio, and then move on to St. Mary and follow on to Babb. Or you can take Highway 2 to East Glacier and continue on to Browning and then go in through that way. It's all about close to 3 hours, no matter what you do. It just depends on what you're feeling.
Yeah, all good suggestions. And if you're going, try a different one each time and see what you like and time it out. Check on our, report of how long it takes, but it is in that range. About 2.5 to 3 hours, no matter what direction you go. So plan for some time in the car, but it's worth the trip. And also, just a quick point, look at the NPS website before you go, because sometimes there's construction in a certain area. They're working on something that needs it. Sometimes there's a trail closure. And actually, I see Iceberg Lake fairly often say, closed due to bear frequenting or bear sign or something on the trail that attracts bears. And so you'd hate to drive that distance, be all ready, and then get to the trail with a closure sign. So make sure you check before you go. And the good thing about Glacier, Sarah, is that if you got there and your trail was closed, there are probably 3 or 4 others.
I was just thinking that. You have a lot of options, but always have a plan B. But yes, there's so much to see over there. You can have a plan B and go off on a different trail. But yes, I agree with you, Josh. Always check the NPS website, go under trail status, and go from there. And they list everything pretty often.
Yeah, reports, folks that have hiked it sometimes, and rangers, they'll offer pretty specific reports on amounts of snow and things like that. So, yep, check it out before you go so that you aren't disappointed. But I love Many Glaciers. There's those 4 or 5 different drainages that you can go up. Ptarmigan Tunnel, Swift Currents, Grinnell Glacier, Iceberg Lake, Cracker Lake. So this is like a hiker's paradise over there.
So once you're at the lake, you'll notice a couple of permanent snow fields at the head of the lake. Those are actually remnants of a glacier because, like I mentioned before, so this lake is called a tarn. It's basically a small alpine lake that forms in a bowl-shaped depression, which is called the cirque. This was, of course, carved out by a glacier. And when the glacier melts, it leaves behind this deep depression and the water fills up, mostly from the remnants of the nearby melting glacier or other snowfields that are kind of draining into it. And the tarn is usually held in place by the accumulation of rock and debris that's left over by the glacier. This is like known as the glacier moraine in the till, which I've mentioned before. So kind of holds it in there, which is kind of cool. But the color of the lake. So I remember when we went to Canada and we encountered some of these big alpine lakes, and some of these tarns can be rather large and they can be small, but they're all usually, if they're fed by a glacier, they're this unique aquamarine or turquoise color. And it's caused by glacier flour, or we like to say flowered silt, which is a fine sediment ground up or kind of pulverized rock suspended in the water. So picture like sandpaper grinding up the rock. When the sunlight hits these suspended particles, it scatters the light in a way that's primarily reflects the blue and the green wavelengths back to our eyes. So those are the longer wavelengths. So basically the glacier is, like I said, a giant piece of sandpaper. It's just crushing the stone into a fine silt-like powder. The water itself naturally absorbs the longer wavelengths of the visible light, like the shades of red, orange, and yellow. The suspended particles of the glacier flour scatter the remaining shorter wavelengths, which is the blue and the green, and it reflects them back to you. So depending on the mineral composition of this bedrock being crushed by the glacier, it affects the exact shade of the tarn. So you'll get variations in the aqua, color. In Canada, I feel like they were a little bit deeper color. Iceberg Lake is pretty spectacular too. It's a little bit lighter of a hue, but when the sun is coming down full tilt, you can really see that color pop. And you can actually, when you get to the lake, kind of veer off to the left, and there's a little bit of scree and talus. You can kind of go up and gain a little bit of elevation and look back down on the lake, and it makes for some pretty incredible photographs.
Yeah, I love that, the color of all these lakes. And in fact, Many Glacier has some of the best, between Iceberg Lake, Cracker Lake, Grinnell Lake. Like, these are the ones to see, and these are the ones you often see in photos or on a calendar or something. So you've got to visit Many Glacier. Iceberg Lake is one of our favorites over there. And Sarah, can you say that again? Because I am familiar with the glacial silts and how that looks and the cause of it. But what about the light? Again, you said the reflection or the refraction of it.
Yeah, so when the sunlight hits the suspended particles, it kind of scatters that light in a way that primarily reflects blue and green wavelengths back to our eyes, but that. Okay. So some of the wavelengths of light are absorbed and some of them are reflected, and that's where we get the color. Yeah.
But the trail is full of pretty much everything. Grizzly sign often on the trail or near the trail. There's moose. Didn't we see a coyote once?
We did see a coyote.
So, I mean, all kinds of stuff. The wildlife is abundant. The flowers are beautiful. The harebells, the bluebells on the trail side. And there's some great history over on this side of the park.
Yeah, so the Blackfeet call this lake Ice Lake, kind of named after, the bergs. It's late in thawing, so it stays frozen over for a relatively long time. Like we talked about, those bergs can be kind of floating around up into July. So the name of the lake was maybe named by Hugh Monroe in the 1850s, or it could have been named by George Bird Grinnell in 1890. So no one really knows for sure, but they're two great individuals that were known in the park for naming things. So
yeah, Iceberg Lake makes sense. There's a couple different ways to come from it. As Sarah mentioned, a photo up from the left side, a photo up from as you're approaching the lake. People look tiny. The left side is also a good place to dive in. There's a few rocks, but this is a must hike. Again, Iceberg Lake, 4.5 miles one way, 9-mile round trip, 1,200 feet. So it's not strenuous. You can do it. Bring a family. Be ready for anything. Weather comes in from the west over the mountains, and you've got to see it. Many Glacier Valley is just tremendous. So I hope you enjoyed that. Tune in next time as we explore some more hikes on that side of the park. And remember to follow this podcast on Apple or Spotify. I'm Josh.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are the Hiking Fools, encouraging you to always go